Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for the CFO Perspective Lessons Learned from the Gen AI Revolution of 2023 and Predictions for 2024. My name is Devin Clark. I'm the moderator today for our roundtable discussion. I'm Centime's Director of Demand Generation, and I'm joining you from Boston, Massachusetts. Please feel free to share where you're joining from us today in the Zoom chat. And just before we begin, I do want to let everyone know about a few housekeeping notes. So first off, we are recording. If you are curious to go back and rewatch this discussion at any time, we'll send you the on-demand recording via email in the next few days. Second, we please encourage you to perform with the polls. So if you are, it just really gives the speakers an understanding of who you are today, helps guide the conversation. If you're joining from CPA Academy, you are required to answer at least 3 of the CPA polls. So there are 4 total polls throughout the duration of this webinar. And after I'm done speaking, I will launch the first one. And then lastly, we are on chat and Q&A, so we encourage you to submit any questions that you have for our speakers today through the Q&A feature on Zoom, and use the chat to talk with everyone that is also here and joining you in the session. So again, this is kind of what will pop up on your screen whenever we're launching a poll. If for any reason you cannot find where the polls are, it will be right in between that raise a hand and Q&A icon on the bottom bar for you. So with that, I am pleased to introduce you to all of the speakers that we have for you today. I'm going to let BC kick us off of just sharing a little bit about who you are and really why your unique perspective is so interesting for today's discussion. So I will stop sharing and let you chat.
All right. So hello, everybody. Does this mean that I share my screen now, Devin? Is that the idea?
You can share your screen, of course.
All right. I have your permission. And it won't collide with the poll or anything like that. I won't get people won't yell at me because they don't see the poll question. Cool. Hey, everybody. My name is BC Krishna. I'm the founder and CEO of Centime. I'm also the contrarian in the room. And I plan to really kind of, challenge everything that everybody's saying about anything. And I want to start out with a somewhat provocative 3 or 4 things about the subject at hand. I know we're going to talk about, AI. And I want to just make a couple of statements, right? So, I mean, obviously, AI and generative AI and ChatGPT and so forth are kind of taking the world by storm right now. You can't really even go out and get your mail without having the mailman asking you what ChatGPT and generative AI are about. And there's really kind of 2 perspectives that you can take on this. One is the sort of gee whiz perspective, everything is going to change. I might as well go back to school, crawl under the table, sky is falling. Oh my goodness, what am I going to do kind of thing, right? And clearly there are in some industries, there are elements of that are going to come true. But there's also the other side of it, which is the completely curmudgeonly, I've seen this before. This is what they said when computers came along. This is what they said when Excel spreadsheets were launched, that our jobs were going to be taken, that we would all go into a little pod and be launched into space like Wall-E and become completely dysfunctional. But, that is not going to be true either, right? I think it's fair to say that, at this point, this is a revolution. There's no question. But I don't think we really know at this point how this revolution is actually going to impact us, and particularly in the world of finance, accounting, exactly where things are going to change for the better and for worse. I hope that today what we will do is to have a debate discussion with Seth, with Chris, who I think are not shrinking violets, and they have their own perspectives on what these things are. And I certainly hope that you will provoke and have conversations about the topic at hand. That said, there are 4 or 5 slides I want to say, because at some level we want to talk about generative AI, but another thing that we want to do is to just really pontificate, right? And look into the future and make grand pronouncements based on no information about what's going to happen in the future. So I'll just say a few things, right? Please bear with me.
Before we dive into the slides, BC, do you mind if Seth and Chris, you guys?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Please go ahead.
Seth, I'll
Seth,
let
go
you
ahead.
kick us off there.
Me first? All right, excellent. Hi, everyone. I'm Seth Fineberg. I'm currently the founder of my own consulting company to the accounting profession called Accountants Forward. What I do is, I speak with accounting firms and also a lot of the service-based companies that are, feeding into the accounting space about just sort of how to, have a better conversation with them, how to have better partnerships together. I think a lot of, and some of what we're going to touch on today is, some of the misinformation that can be out there on both sides, and how things can ultimately move forward for accountants in the accounting profession. Accountants, of course, work very, very closely with a lot of you all, with a lot of CFOs and finance teams to help, kind of, obviously keep compliant, but also kind of help sort of shepherd, the way through. We've had definitely a challenging several years. My background is as a business journalist. I've been a business journalist now for over 30 years. I spent a good 20 plus years in the accounting space, both as an editor, technology editor, and editor for Accounting Today, and also the lead editor for Accounting Web for nearly 8 years. So it is my pleasure to be here and offer my perspective on things today. Chris?
Pontificate, as it were.
Pontificate, as it were. Thank you, BC.
All right, I'm Chris Sands. I'm the CFO of a company called IntelyCare, which is a digital labor platform serving the healthcare space. So we help healthcare facilities fill their contingent labor needs, full-time needs, by using our platform. So, and I think probably the only actual and practicing accountant and finance professional on the call. So perhaps that's why I got the nod, but happy to be here.
Like, you're the only one who knows what we're talking about.
Your words, not mine.
It's good. I asked before coming on, I said, Chris, what are you good at? Or say that you're great at some things, and he didn't want to. So, thank you for joining. So here are my kind of, a few thoughts. And I'll just say, like, most predictions are wrong. Because most predictions are based on inaccurate and incomplete information. And so everything that we're going to say today has a very, very, very high probability of being wrong. But I do believe that, we're trying to approach it from, from a perspective of being thoughtful. And hopefully we'll get something out of the debate. Even if we're wrong, at least we'll be debating substantive issues. Most predictions are self-serving. And I hope that doesn't happen today. If I'm going to say that electric cars are going to take over in the coming year, it's quite possible that I have a network of charging stations, or maybe I'm a car dealer, but today I think that we want to talk in general terms about, like, what's going to happen in this world. But hopefully today we'll not sort of dive into the self-serving bit too much. Maybe here and there we will. The third is, what is so special about the turn of the year for predictions, right? Why don't we do predictions, let's say, on February 15th or March 31st, right? After all, we are looking ahead some number of months. And I'm semi-serious, because the reality is that, things that happen at the end of the year, books closing, earnings reports, political events like the Iowa caucuses or Super Tuesday, or what the IRS rules are about taxation, right? These are things that are sort of perhaps more material, to predictions than, what has happened last year. But it's kind of a weird thing that we have to, like, sit here on December 31st or the end of the year and, like, make grand pontifications about what's going to happen. Anyway, so I'm like I said, I'm semi-serious about this. But what I also wanted to do is to just really touch on three things that nobody could have possibly predicted. We all more or less can guess what they are. But number one is that I don't think any one of us would have predicted that 3 major banks would fail. And for what reasons too, right? I mean, it was just really strange that the circumstances under which these banks actually failed. Interest rates were rising. They made some poor decisions. And the result is, and in retrospect, they made poor decisions. In the moment, many people had thought that, sort of even regulators thought that the decisions that they made were sound decisions. But the reality is that we lost, 3 banks that were north of $100 billion in assets each. Now, many of you may well have banked at these banks and had to deal and dig out of the challenges that happened. But it's also the reality is that even if you didn't bank at one of these 3 banks, The fact is that, we were all sort of exposed to the reality that FDIC deposits are only covered to the tune of $250,000, and that, businesses were sort of suddenly exposed to the reality and the fact that, I might have more than $250,000 in the bank, and I need to do something to, protect myself in the future. And so I think people, I hope I'm not putting words in your mouth, Chris, but I think people like you started to think about things like deposit diversification as a thing that was, just the reality of it. The second thing that I wanted to say is that I don't think anybody would have kind of really predicted that, the whole FTX, Sam Bankman-Fried crypto drama would, play out the way it did. I think people were sort of, were sure that this was what's going to happen. Maybe not everybody, but this was certainly a wave. But the weird thing about this is also that at the same time that crypto collapsed, the price of Bitcoin has gone up. It's a kind of strange anomaly, because you would think, well, not you, but I would think that, if crypto has collapsed, then maybe everything around crypto would collapse too. But at the same time, as you can see, Bitcoin has been up by 136% this year. And it's sort of hard to reconcile those two perspectives. And I think earlier when we were chatting, I think, you made the point, Seth, that there were other things that had a lot of heat associated with, a lot of interest associated with crypto that seems to have kind of fallen by the wayside a little bit. Things like, blockchain, and the fact that, distributed ledgers were the wave of the future, and that we're going to move money in this egalitarian fashion. Well, guess what? We're all sort of backing out and dealing with basic stuff at this point. Third thing that I wanted to say is that while November last year brought ChatGPT, and this year, and this is kind of the topic at hand today, we've seen the explosion of generative AI. I don't think anybody would have predicted that Sam Altman would have been fired, or that he would have been rehired, or that, we have this new show every day that we watch, which is not only is AI breathlessly the future of computing, the future of society, the future of everything that we do, but it's also this incredible soap opera that's playing out every day almost. Now, granted, it seems to be that the most recent season of this AI soap opera has ended, but I am very confident that the entire series has not been completely played out. There's so much more to be had here, but the point is that there are some real issues here. No matter what you say about the Sam Altman saga, if you really dig into under the covers of what happened, the reality is that we are faced with this sort of existential choice, right? Of how fast do we go? Do we cast aside the controls, the guardrails that we might need to ensure that bad things don't happen? And I don't mean jobs being taken away. I'm talking about mundane things like professors in universities having to judge whether the term paper was actually written by a student or was a product of, ChatGPT or, something else like that, right? These are real issues. And I think that these are the types of things that I think that we're going to have to face. So I'll pause here, and that's what I wanted to kick off.
And I'm just going to jump in before Seth or Chris, you can kind of share some of your reflections on what happened over this past year. I am going to launch the second poll for everyone, and we will keep that up for several minutes. So thank you. All right, Seth, Chris, do you have any kind of immediate reactions? I know one of the first things that BC had touched on was a lot of these banking collapses, SVB being one of them. Anything kind of you want to share on your reflections on that side?
Sure, I'm happy to start, Seth, and you can jump in. So, certainly didn't see that coming. And had I seen it coming, I wouldn't have had all of my company's deposits at SVB, because that wouldn't have been too thoughtful. So that was certainly surprising. I'll probably take it from a little bit of a different angle, because I think the whole purpose of this session is to say, okay, well, we're going to make predictions, but certainly a lot of things that we don't anticipate are going to happen, and a lot of the predictions won't actually come to fruition. So what does that mean for how we prepare for the year ahead, or just prepare in general? And so, an interesting anecdote from my perspective around SVB is, obviously I didn't see it coming. we were able to get through it, as most people were, given all of the deposits ended up being protected. We actually then went into a very reactionary state with our investors who were, and as a leadership team, which is like, okay, well, we weren't really thinking about the risk around diversification of deposits like BC mentioned at the outset. So what do we do now? So we pivoted hard to, we should bank with major money center banks, and we moved all of our deposits. Well, fast forward 5 months, our credit facility is up for renewal, and it's like, okay, well, now we have to go through that with this major money center bank, which is not as friendly and conducive to lending to our type of business. And so, I think the moral there is whether it's AI or bank failures or whatever, we tend to react to these things in the moment because of the impact that they've had, without necessarily thinking about all the factors, right? So like I think, if we had our druthers, we probably would still have kept a fair amount of money with a smaller bank that is more suitable to us from a lending perspective. But we weren't really thinking about that risk at the time because we were so wrapped up in reacting to what had just happened. So, for me, and we'll talk more about this as we talk about 2024, it's like, it's good to have a view on what may happen and what has happened in the past, but more times than not, it doesn't really or shouldn't really have a huge impact on how you think about kind of the fundamentals of running a finance function or doing a finance job. So,
can I just interject before Seth you weigh in here? I wanted to ask this sort of dumb, stupid question, right? Why do we all have knee-jerk responses to events like this? What's sort of, why do we as human beings whip ourselves into frenzy about like these negative events? What's the story here? Everybody here wants to fire Bill Belichick, of course, because he lost like 6 games, but he's a good coach, right?
He's lost 10 games for the official count,
Yeah,
but
whatever.
does that make a difference? Can
I was going to say it's a
win
few
the Super Bowl in
more.
2024?
Yeah, so I think part of I guess what I'm saying is that part of basically running a tight ship is, as you said, Chris, is to just really have a little bit of foresight into what risks are likely to arise, and for the most part manage the risks that you know about, but not overreact to the risks that do show up and the events that take place.
Yeah, look, I'll offer my answer, which is I don't have an answer. See the intro where I said I was an accountant, not a psychologist, so I can't speak to why that is human nature. But to a comment you made earlier around self-awareness, like realizing that whether it's the rollout of AI and do we like overcorrect to that and think that because AI is the way of the future, which it very well may be, that we mass adopt solutions in finance to leverage AI because we think that's what's in fad and, constitutes being a kind of progressive tech forward CFO without thinking through all of the potential consequences of doing that, which is like, is this technology really ready to do everything that it says it is? And, it may have very good use cases, but finance in particular is an area where judgment and precision is very important in everything that we do. And, the technology, at least in my opinion, or from what I've seen and heard, is not there yet. So again, I don't know why human nature is the way that it is, but as I personally kind of think forward to, 2024 and planning and setting the company and my function up for success, it's less around, what's in fad, not to say you can completely ignore it and say that it's not going to have an impact, but to be very thoughtful about that. And, no, certainly from my perspective, rush to be kind of early adopter or first there. So.
I want to come back to that point, but go ahead, Seth, because I do want to come back to your statement there.
Yeah, no, that's quite all right. And thank you. On your, and then I'm going to sort of go backwards a little bit, but on your question about why, I have kind of a unique perspective on that, being a journalist as long as I have, particularly in the business space. I've seen a lot of the quick reactions to all kinds of things that some of us saw coming. Like I'll go back to even the first .com bubble. A lot of us saw that coming because we kind of read a bit of the tea leaves, which to some of us seemed pretty obvious. We're like, well, there's always that old phrase, "We'll follow the money." You saw where money was going, and the fact that very few of those companies had real business plans. They had great ideas, and those ideas were funded. And eventually, they were, hoping a business plan would somehow magically appear. But for a lot of them, it didn't. And then, I remember a lot of people even predicting the failure of Amazon. They're like, this was back in the late 90s. And, I did have the pleasure of interviewing Jeff Bezos back then. But, they were nothing more than just, they were selling books and then eventually CDs. They're like, oh, how quaint. We could look back on it now. And, people were saying, well, how can something like that sustain as a business? And what he was really building was a customer service platform. And he told me this, very, very directly. So, when you can only look at sort of part of the picture, and again, in our lives, in our busy lives as finance professionals, as accounting professionals, a lot of times you don't always have the luxury to kind of look at the whole thing, even though that is part of your job, is to be able to sit back and kind of look at everything. But it's some of the quick reactions that a lot of people get. I mean, look, particularly in today's day and age, when we consume information, I'm not even going to call it news, I'm just going to call it information, on a regular from multiple different places. Sure, one could be very flippant and say, well, there's a lot of money in headlines, there's a lot of money in just kind of getting some reaction. But eventually things do kind of ease out. If you follow, the stock market is to me, it's one big kind of reactionary platform. Eventually it finds a level. But initially, where you see some of these spikes and things like that, it's what's it doing? It's reacting to the news cycle. It's reacting to earnings reports, which, again, once you start digging into them and things like that, you go, okay, well, maybe things aren't quite as, it seems. So, so in the news, we, have already kind of been experiencing the, with the coming of AI, we've already kind of heard left and right about how, jobs would be replaced. People, this is not a new narrative at all. AI is the new, it's the shiny, it's the, and I think it's capable of doing great things, but it's just another level of automation. Just like cloud, just like any software we've seen out there. And some of you maybe have been around long enough to have even heard the narrative of when Excel sort of came around and said, oh, you're not going to need accountants. You're not going to need, finance professionals. There's Excel, it's going to replace your job. I've been there. I've seen it. And, we're going to continue to experience it. And it's more a matter of just really kind of sitting back and kind of looking at it from a balanced perspective. AI right now is still very new. It's very young. It's literally the new kid on the block. ChatGPT just celebrated its first birthday. And not that that's all that it's going to be. Machine learning has actually been a part of accounting and finance software for several years now. Not quite in this form, but I think it has a lot of potential, and some of that potential I think worries people. So when you have, again, the publications like the New York Times with a big headline back in March saying AI's threat to jobs prompts the question of who protects workers. Like, it's the Times. And you're like, okay, wow, like this. And they did, the reporter did, and I see it's been updated a couple of times over the years to add some more information and another perspective. But by and large, you have some of these people, noted people, Sam Altman himself even being quoted in this as, and he had said there will be an impact on jobs. And I think it will require partnerships between the industry and the government to mostly, action by the government. Okay, well, the old government to the rescue narrative is also kind of old. But the bottom line is it's another technology platform that you as finance professionals and team leaders, need to kind of get your heads around and not get too reactionary about. but also don't poo-poo it at the same time either. Both of those are dangerous, in my view. So I'm happy to get on with our the rest of our conversation here today, but that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think I want to come back to you, Chris, and maybe push back a little bit, Seth, on your perspective, because every new wave, every new technology, every new innovation, will have these perspectives, right? Guess what? Like, the world is going to completely be turned upside down, or the other extreme, which is, guess what? It's just another thing. We'll deal with it. But going back to you, Chris, I take your point that, the finance function is about precision, predictability, and so forth. But, and just going back to what Seth just said, is it not appropriate for you, and maybe you're doing this already, to kind of really dig in and be more introspective about how it can change? Are you doing anything within your business to say, like, you know what, I need to learn more about generative AI in particular, so that I can be better prepared and not reactionary? And if that was the case, then what are you doing, if you don't mind me putting you on the spot?
I think I signed up for that when I agreed to do the webinar. But in any event, so yes, that is a huge part of my job. But I would take it up a level, and for me, it's less about any one specific technology, whether it is ChatGPT or generative AI, et cetera, and more about the role that technology is playing in the finance function. So I do think one of these secular macro trends is the adoption of technology in the finance function for 2 reasons, not just because of the prevalence of that technology and it exists, but also the role of the finance function and the CFO has evolved so much. And if you want me to put forward like a prediction for 2024, it will continue to evolve. So and it's evolving in a way that is not, hey, this is what CFOs used to do, and now it's the same amount and it's different. It's, hey, you have to do all of that. That part's harder than it ever was, and you need to do all of this. So if you think about even the way people ascend into the CFO role, going back 20 years ago, it was through the controllership was probably the most common path there. It's still a very common path, but because of what is expected out of the role and the function, the kind of aperture on how you get there is opened up to include bankers and analysts and people that came up through FP&A and technologists and so
this is where I push back a little bit. Sorry to interrupt you.
Okay.
I understand your perspective that you want to step back and say, like, hey, this is technology. Technology in general is going to have an impact on me, my CFO function. Things have changed, blah, blah, blah,
Yep.
blah. All that is completely accurate and, with all due respect, completely generic.
Okay.
Okay. My point is that there's something really unique about this generative AI revolution.
Yep.
And what's unique about it is just, maybe we're all sort of infatuated with the anthropomorphization of AI, right? Because all of a sudden,
I don't even know what that word means, but if you say so.
It's becoming a thing.
Okay.
A human,
It
like it's a
is
human
thing,
interface.
a
Like
living
all of a sudden, it
thing.
feels like you're
Yeah.
interacting with a human being, right?
Yeah.
And that, there's this sort of, not to take us off topic here, but way back, if some of you that are on the call may remember, there was this mathematician named Alan Turing that postulated something called the Turing test relating to AI, right? And basically what he said is that, computers will pass the Turing test if the person interacting with the computer doesn't know that it's a computer.
Yep.
Okay.
The
And
rules,
I think,
the rules. Yeah.
I think today we have way past the Turing test, right? And again, like I said, I'm not going to go down that path just yet. The reason I'm pushing back is that there's something special going on here that is very unique and very specific to how AI has taken the world by storm. And I'm going to ask you once again, yes, I get the point that you're making, that technology is influencing how CFOs function and all those kinds of things.
Okay.
But provocatively, wouldn't you make it your responsibility to say, you know what, there's something special going on here. These are my priorities as a CFO. Should I not assign resources to find out how those priorities can be enabled or improved through the use of generative AI? The answer may well be that it can't, and that's okay. But I would, the provocative question that I'm asking you is, why wouldn't you spend more time digging deeper as opposed to stepping back? I'm not saying this is not a zero-sum game.
Yeah.
It's not that one and the other are mutually exclusive. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying?
So if I understand, the question is, am I, or do I feel that I have a responsibility to specifically spend time thinking about generative AI in 2024 and putting it to work in the finance function?
I'll ask it's sort of yes. I
Okay.
will go one step further and say, I think you have a responsibility to find out how generative AI can align with your priorities and improve your ability to execute and get to that, to achieve your goals.
Okay. Okay. So the short answer for me is no. I won't spend much time doing that in 2024. And so I guess your follow-up question is why?
Exactly.
And what's that?
Yes, exactly. That's my follow-up
Yeah.
question.
So see my aforementioned where you interrupted me on just the list of things that I have to do and the company has to do and we have to do around the finance function. And right, wrong, or otherwise, based on my perception of where that technology is today and the use cases and applications that I'm aware of in finance, and seen enough to warrant that in that list of priorities. So that's why I personally won't be devoting a lot of time to it, at least to start the year. Certainly, we know with goals, everyone reserves the right to evolve them over the year. So if some new product comes out that is based around generative AI that I think could be very impactful for a function, of course, I'm going to look at it. Do I need to spend a lot of time and resources before that product is invented or figure out what that use case is? No, or will I? I mean, I don't know if I should, but I won't.
Yeah. So I think that this is where I would say, like, we're in that sort of red pill, blue pill moment, and I'll tee this up, and I want to get back to you, Seth, on it.
By the way, are
Right.
other people seeing these chats that they think that we're AI? So like, I'm like trying not to laugh and see this because that's hilarious.
I was going to respond to that. I
Okay,
saw that.
all right, okay, good. Well, at least we're getting engagement. So
I was going to say, I love the chats.
We're
Keep
not-
coming, guys. I think that
yeah,
somebody
yeah.
said at one point that it was all CYA. Like, oh, great, good stuff. Let's keep it coming. But the point I want to make is this, Chris, that I get it. I really am, look, my goal here is to provoke, right? And, and so I understand what you're saying. And I'll tell you that there are probably in this audience that we have, which is a reasonable number, there are probably going to be two types of people, right? And, there's the red pill, blue pill moment is like, of course, that scene from The Matrix, right? Which is like, you can be the person that takes the red pill and says, you know what, I'm going to keep it the way it was, right? And I'm going to, like, see whether my life is going to change, take the sort of, really more passive path, I suppose I would say. And there are the others that will take the blue pill, or I don't know which pill you took, but, the red pill, and say, like, you know what, things are going to change. I am a CFO that believes that this is going to change my life. And I might not completely turn my department upside down. But what I might do is to say, I'm going to go partner with, AI, IT. I'm going to hire a person that, really is going to be is going to challenge me and sort of maybe show me the way in which this can help me. So
now I get to be provocative and push back. Are you suggesting that I'm the blue, boring, change is never going to happen pill?
No, I'm just saying that you're a stable, predictable, very, I would want you to be my CFO, Chris. Let me just be clear, right?
You would or would not?
I would.
Okay,
right.
all right.
But what I'm saying is that there are also going to be other people who sort of really take the other perspective that says, you know what, this is going to change my life. I am going to dedicate resources to find out how it's going to change my life. Maybe there's nobody there, but that's my point, right?
Yeah.
So
let me, again, I don't view it that binary. My guess is if we can do like a spontaneous poll question, Devin, I'm guessing most of the audience is going to be in my camp, which is like, you don't have the luxury of thinking of things like binary.
You have a lot of support
either this is revolutionary and I have to go shift the entire focus of my org because my board, my boss, my investors, like they're still going to be asking us to do everything else. So I don't have the luxury of having the generative AI field trip in 2024 where it's like, oh, sorry, I didn't do all of that other stuff that we need to do. But I did find out a lot about ChatGPT, right? So it's, again, I don't
But
view it
what
that
if,
way. I think you can acknowledge and embrace technology without having to make dramatic shifts and say, wow, this thing was hot in the second half of 2023. Therefore, it has to be at the top of our goal list in 2024. So,
would you have said that about the internet when it came along?
well, I mean, this now we can get into some
The internet kind of
stuff. I don't
stunk
want
when
to
it
talk
came
like,
along.
yeah. I was thinking about goldfish and gummy bears when the internet came out. So that's you can answer that.
I
Yeah.
was not.
Anyway, so here's my prediction for 2024.
Okay.
Right. I think that, I mean, it seems like maybe an obvious thing to do, which is like, I think most people are going to be a little bit more careful and conservative when it comes to jumping headlong into what ChatGPT does for them,
I
either
would hope so.
personally or within the finance function.
Yeah. Well, and
Go
I would
ahead,
say in
Seth.
finance function, we have a fiduciary duty to be cautious around that. And like, again, you can be progressive and tech forward and also have to acknowledge your responsibility about managing risk and not kind of jumping on the bandwagon. I shouldn't say bandwagon because I do believe in generative AI and that it will continue to evolve and probably in a way that is very helpful to finance. But anyway.
I think we should. I want to just. I don't know. Somehow I became the moderator. It's not my intent.
No, you're totally okay, BC.
But Seth, go ahead. I think you're bursting with things to say. But because before you say that, I just wanted to say one thing. Before we're done with this session, I do want people to talk about what they think ChatGPT can do very specifically within the finance function. But go ahead, Seth.
Look, we've already are covering a lot of bases, and what I can say, what it's all centering around is still the technology adoption curve. I still think a great source of at least information, even though it's kind of old at this point. Sorry, Jeffrey, but Jeffrey Moore's book, Crossing the Chasm. I still think that applies. You have your early adopters, you have your early majority, you have your late majority, and so on and so forth. Accountants, accounting, finance teams, CFOs, you are and should be measured in what you do. Somebody actually did bring up the point. I love this point, Jennifer. Thank you. It is a catch-22 because of the pace of business today. It's like you are too busy to learn the good and bad of AI or any new technologies. There's some folks who are just now starting to get off a desktop. They're like, yeah, it makes more sense to be on some cloud solution or another, even though a lot of them have been around for close to 20 years. Fine, you do what works for you. But in order to stay competitive, in order to keep your company, moving forward, you do have to devote some time, or at least make it someone's job to go, all right, look, you go out and test these things. Have a champion. Have someone from your, even from your team, maybe it's even from IT. I remember a time where things were siloed. Now it's called the C-suite. It's called the C-suite for a reason, because you're all are talking to each other now. There was a time when I started covering business where the CEO just did their thing. The CFO did their thing. Marketing did their thing. IT did their thing. Now you're all talking to each other, or you should be. So the more progressive companies, and now it's, almost a requirement that you all kind of weigh in, but make it someone's job to actually go, you know what? Let's do some research on this. I've got to report to the board at the end of the month. I want to see, this, and this in that report. So you can be measured, but also forward thinking at the same time. That's kind of my 2 cents on it. Again, just as someone who's covered business, covered tech for so long, I see a lot of common mistakes that can be made. It's like you want to take some chances. You want to be somewhat of a risk taker, and the business environment today almost requires it, doesn't it? That that you are as to BC's point, skeptical, but also still kind of forward thinking at the same time. It is a difficult way to be, but you have to look at your own teams. And that's something too, I think we could get into, even in a separate discussion about building the teams that are around you. Perhaps some of you, and I know at some point we wanted to talk about staffing and the staffing issue that finance teams are currently facing. We all have inflation to deal with. There's a lot of conflicting numbers coming at us in the same way that there's conflicting reports about, the dominance of AI, the takeover of technology. Inflation is also kind of its own sort of mixed bag, is it not? So, but you all have to sort of respond to some of the numbers that, that you're seeing.
Bringing it back to
Right.
ChatGPT, not
Let's bring it
ChatGPT,
back.
but AI, generative AI. I do want to get to the question about staffing, and which is always an issue, right? I mean, and the good news is, of course, the economy seems to be in better shape than it was a year ago. The bad news is that
But
there's hardly anybody like
But
in
I
the.
have a report here that says it won't be. It shouldn't be.
Okay, go
Can
ahead.
I
So just
point
going
out
back to our
something?
original,
Can I point something out just since we're in the mode of stirring the pot here? Seth, on the one hand, said, "Oh, you should have someone on your team that is dedicated to exploring ChatGPT." I also acknowledge that you don't even have enough people on your team to do the other jobs that you're supposed to have. So again, that gets to like the reality of where we are, Seth,
Sure.
and like exactly why.
But maybe it's IT. Maybe it's someone from the
Maybe
IT
it's
team.
IT. So you meant in
Okay.
the company, not necessarily
In
the
the company.
finance
Oh, yeah, yeah.
function.
That's sorry. In your team, meaning your
Okay.
company.
Okay.
In the
Okay.
company, you're all talking to each other, or should be, as I said. Have this. The CIO, the CMO, the CFO, and the CEO should all be on the same page.
Yeah, I'll just say, like,
view.
just coming back to this, right? I mean, look, it is an enabling technology. There's no question about it. By itself, it doesn't do anything, right? It has to be used and applied to business processes and daily life in order for it to have some impact and be practical, right? AI is not a car. It's the wheels, it's the sort of infrastructure that makes the engine run, so to speak, right? But I really think
Sorry,
that's
David Hasselhoff.
but the point I'm making is that, because it's an enabling technology and because it has such promise, whether you believe in that promise or not, I think we have a responsibility to establish for ourselves whether that promise can benefit us. And I think the only way to really move forward is for us to establish it ourselves, rather than somebody telling us that, you need to jump on the bandwagon because it's going to turn your world into amazing things. It's just not going to happen. That's all I'm trying to say, which is, again, I approach this from the perspective of being somewhat of a curmudgeon and I'm somewhat of a Luddite. I have a healthy disrespect for technology, but I also think that the movement is real. The technology is amazing, but I do think it's important for each of us to establish for ourselves, in whatever way we think is appropriate, with whatever resources we think we have, however we want to prioritize it. And if we choose not to prioritize it, so be it, right? But I think here we are at this point where we have responsibility to decide whether that's something that we want to invest in. Not that you're going to sort of suddenly turn the company upside down, but I think we have a responsibility to sort of apply ourselves to understanding whether or not this ubiquitous, world-changing, or at least if it's not world-changing, thing that has taken the world by storm can apply to us. That's all.
Thanks, BC. I do just want to say I'm sharing the poll results right now, and it looks like about 40% when you're asked about your biggest concerns for 2024 are around growing the business, setting realistic goals, and growth. So Chris, I think that kind of leads into maybe what a strategic vision of a CFO should be. So I think let's get into that next. We only have around 15 minutes left. And then 35% answered navigating uncertain economic and political environments. So I think let's spend the second half of what's remaining for time focused on that. But Chris, thinking of kind of growing the business, what a CFO's strategic vision should be for 2024, do you have any insights of maybe what you're planning for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, this gets right to the point I was trying to make earlier before BC interrupted me and all hell broke loose, which is like what the CFO is asked to do, right? Like it is no longer, hey, close the books, produce the financial statements, report out to the board. It is you are writing co-pilot with the CEO in most cases, and figuring out navigating everything throughout the business and navigating the client environment and the market environment, and really understanding through the whole analytics FP&A piece of the finance function, like what makes the business tick, how to set those goals, how to cascade those goals throughout the org. And so I am spending almost all of my time, like today and this week, working on that stuff for us in 2024. We're personally later than I would like to be in our 2024 budget cycle, but our market has been really dynamic, which I guess is a euphemism for volatile, and so it's a little bit more challenging than it has been in years past. But that is by far, I would say, the number one task that I'm with, and I remember tasked with, and I'm sure most of the folks on the call, is around how do we help create value in the business by driving growth, by finding efficiencies, all of that. So, specific tactics on how people do that, it will vary from company to company and person to person, but the point remains that when that becomes such a big focus of the job and the role, it requires you to think differently about how you do everything in the finance function, which is why I was making the point earlier, like the necessity of leveraging technology so that you can free up more capacity and bandwidth to have more folks in the team driving towards those strategic aims is imperative. So I'll kind of pause.
Thinking about some of those tools, we did just launch the last poll, so poll number 4, asking you just to kind of prioritize from a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the lowest, 5 being the highest, what you rank for cash flow forecasting, AP automation, AR, expense management, and fraud protection, risk management. So please answer that. And Seth, I think I'll let you respond and react to Chris as well.
He and I are definitely on board with a lot of it. I love seeing how the CFO role has evolved over time. That you're no longer just, and much like accountants in general, you're no longer just closing the books and you're the compliance officer. You are like the conscience really of the company. The CEO of the company, I think, should be the visionary, the grand vision, and everyone sort of under that individual, should be, kind of going along with the vision. The CFO is kind of the conscience. They're the money people, right? They're going, are we spending right? Where are we spending? What's coming in? What's going out? But you also want to be more, proactive. You don't want to be, caught flat-footed on anything. And that's why I'm still, very much a proponent of, having, someone at your company or maybe even a small team, be tasked with going, okay, what, technologies, should we be, given our goals for the year, that should all be kind of, shared vision, everyone on board, not, hopefully you don't work at a siloed company. So if everyone's on board with the vision, how do we get there? And part of that, how do we get there, I think should be a technology answer. So somebody had actually, thought, oh, well, I saw the title of, this webinar, it didn't seem like it should be, a generative AI discussion. Well, I think that's just the natural course of things. I think we can't talk about where, how, CFOs and finance teams, should be going, heading into 2024, without that discussion, without talking about technology. I could be, talking about other forms of technology too. Like, has anyone out there, looked into FP&A software? Things like Solver and Giraffe and other built-in things to maybe some of the ERP systems that you're using. FP&A, I think, is going to be a bit of a game changer for you. I think it allows you as a CFO and finance team leader to kind of have that vision. It's, a lot of them present themselves, in that, sort of, or draw data from, from a spreadsheet. They'll work with Excel, and will produce reports that, will make you look like a rock star, and in no uncertain terms. But this is just sort of one area to be thinking of. And it's not like, oh, we need to hire for this or that, because some of you might be stressing going into the new year, thinking about, oh, well, yeah, geez, how are we going to hire and fill these tasks? Well, obviously there's outsourcing options, there's partnerships that you could have out there with, maybe someone who's doing some of these services, and then technology in general. Sorry, BC, go ahead.
No. I mean, Glenn, thank you for that. What I was trying to say was that I also wanted to kind of respond to the comment about like lessons, the lessons learned comment, right? Because the fact of the matter is that, we're in the middle of something that is, taking place. We don't even know what form it's going to take next week, if not like, next month. And so, we're still learning as the whole thing evolves. My point is this, that there are, in the conversations that we've been having in the last 50 minutes or so, it seems to me there are three different themes that are emerging, right? Let alone predictions. Number one, and, I'm really sorry, Chris, to have like, um, you know, buttonholed you and put you on the spot, but I feel like
No, you're not. That's why you struggle to find the words. You knew you weren't sorry, so you're like caught in a lie, but go on.
Humble brag.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Busted.
for everybody, I used to work with Chris, so I feel like I can take advantage of his like being a nice guy. Anyway, so look, I think part of the conversation here is about what is the role of the CFO in ushering AI into the organization, given the state of affairs, right? And I completely understand where you're coming from. I mean, and that's kind of what, and without weighing on it, I would say that that's one of the conversations that we're having. The second is that, if you kind of set aside that particular theme, the second question is AI, as you said, Seth, is a technology like everything else is a technology, right? And it has an influence on hiring, on productivity, on risk. And the most generic question to be asked here is, in what does it mean, to be at the bleeding edge of adopting something within an organization, right? Again, these are all rhetorical questions. I'm not sure there's a clean answer for them. So that's the second part. But perhaps
Jeffrey's book touches on that, by the way. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah,
But he does sort of define that.
Exactly. And the third thing that I wanted to say is that something that's really unique about AI is that it has this anthropomorphic quality, and it has this kind of almost human-like behavior response, which makes it to some degree, I'm going to say dangerous, without understanding what the constraints are likely to be, right? I think for the longest time, whether because of our infatuation of technology or not, we have as a society tended to be more willing to adopt things at the bleeding edge. But in this particular case, AI is definitely something that has great implications for what it means to be at the bleeding edge. And some of what played out, at OpenAI is exactly that. You had board members that were really worried about the fact that it was being pushed at a pace without any regard to the guardrails that needed to be established, whereas there were others that said, you know what, this is an amazing opportunity. Let's push as fast as we can. And you can see this same theme playing out with other bleeding edge technologies. I don't know if you guys have followed the news about like, Tesla recalling 1 million cars because self-driving has failed, right? That's a classic example of pushing something out too quickly, only to discover that it didn't work for us. Cruise being shut down in San Francisco because the self-driving car ran over somebody. These are things that we just should be cognizant of as we kind of push ahead. So the lesson learned from the AI revolution is at some level the same old lesson that we learn from every new technology, right? It has promise. We need to move forward. We need to dedicate ourselves to understanding what it is how it can help us. But at the same time, we've got to be cautious about how we apply it.
Seth, Chris, do you have any final remarks as we wrap up in the last few minutes?
I thought that was well said, BC. I mean, one of your questions you asked is like, what is the role of the CFO to like usher generative AI into the organization? And I don't want my prior comments to be interpreted as there is no role for that. My prior comments were more in the lines of, hey, this was a big deal at the end of 2023, therefore it has to be on the top of my priority list come hell or high water for 2024, right? The role of the CFO, to the conversation we've had multiple times on this webinar, is one, to run the finance function. And so in one regard, the CFO has the obligation to, as a technologist part of the job, figure out how generative AI fits into enhancing the overall tech stack and the finance function. It is my personal belief that there won't be a ton of opportunity for me to do that in 2024, which is why it's not high on my priority list. Of course, if technology comes out that leverages it, like I said, reserve my right to change my mind and adopt that. But the other part, one of the other hats that the CFO wears is a key member of the executive team. And so then there's the enterprise oversight, which is, to Seth's point, like, has a role, pushing the organization to make sure it is considering this type of technology. Again, doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be the number one goal for the organization in 2024, but making sure that the organization is being tech forward on that perspective. Well, at the same time, to your last point, BC, also wearing the risk management hat that falls under the CFO purview, right? So it's not contradictory to be an advocate for exploring this, but also making sure that the organization doesn't overstep and get beyond its risk tolerance for this type of thing. So,
Oh, agreed. And it can't be overstated enough about how you are still risk managers. It is your responsibility to manage risk, but by managing that risk, you can still be forward looking. You can still be aggressive. You can still be proactive while managing risk. Like, you're not going to throw the latest financial report into OpenAI or into a free version of ChatGPT. Not going to happen. Don't do it. But at the same time, you could, as somebody very astutely pointed out, saying, spend the $20 a month and start get someone on it, get someone to actually start literally playing around with what it can do. Someone who is pretty comfortable with technology, and report back to you. Because over the next year, it is going to have some impact on your business. But again, there's more than just AI out there. Again, there's a lot of other tools. FP&A, like I mentioned, I think could have a very positive impact on a lot of the reporting that you're able to do, et cetera, and so on. But as far as where it's going to go, nobody knows. That's not your job to know. It's your job to secure that the financial stability of your company, and carry forth the CEO's vision and the company's vision of where it wants to go, and to do so in the best but most forward thinking way is so when you see reports on the economy, or you see reports on AI, not just ChatGPT, definitely take them with a bit of a grain of salt, of course, but also be smart about it. Don't lose sight of your goals for the year, and have technology in any form help you. I know that's sort of somewhat of a general statement, but it can't be overstated enough, in my view.
No, I appreciate that. Oh, sorry, BC, if I just interrupted you.
No, I think it's a really an interesting conversation and an interesting discussion, and I think I am reflecting more and more on, like, I think also looking at, like, the comments in the chat, about, and I think this kind of notion that a CFO is a risk manager is really driving home. At some level, you might say, like, that, yes, I'm a leader, and I'm responsible for making sure that, I bring in the greatest amount of, like, technology, productivity, improvement in order to achieve my goals. But if I'm putting on my risk manager hat, then you know what? I'm exactly anti all of those things, right? Because what I'm trying to do is to ensure that I mitigate the risk that this runaway technology is going to somehow destroy, the things that, all of these people are claiming will happen. Again, this is the point about, like, hey, self-driving cars are great, but guess what? We have 1 million recalls on Tesla. Now what, right? And so, yeah, so I think some of the people are saying that we want to do this again. I don't know if you mean, like, do the polls again or do the webinar again. But I had fun. I don't know about you guys. And again, like,
I'm game if you are. It went all too fast for me, but I'm sorry for people who are having polling questions and stuff. It does happen, but I'm sure that
You hit on a lot of
Devin
hot
will.
button issues for me. I realized I had this tissue and I just destroyed it that I was holding it there as you were like saying some of these
You
things you were
win.
saying. But
You win, Chris.
yeah, so
Anyone else tear up tissues on their desk?
yeah, but I'd still do it again. So in any event. Okay.
Oh my goodness, Chris, I think you're an officer and a gentleman. Thank you so much for putting up with my cantankerousness.
Yes, yes.
Well,
All right,
thank
thank you guys.
you, Chris, BC, and Seth. Thank you
Bye-bye,
everyone
see you.
also that joined us today, and we hope you have a great holiday season, and we'll see you all in 2024. Oh, Seth.
I've one final question. Is a recording of this going to be available? Nobody asked that. I'm usually the
recording-
one that get asked that right at the beginning.
A recording's going to be available. You'll see an email from me likely in your inbox tomorrow. So thank you everyone so much. And if you had any polling problems, I'll reach out to you directly via email.
And Devin, I would assume you're going to be emailing the certificates, or they'll be emailed.
That will come through CPA Academy.
CPA Academy. That's what I figured. Cool.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Merry
Thank you,
Christmas, Happy
everyone.
New Year.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.